Hello, I'm your host, Pastor David Stevens. The name of our broadcast is Let's Talk About Love, and we're sponsored by Christ-Centered Church of God. We're located in the West Oak Lane section of the city, 1615-19 West Chelten Avenue, right in the heart of West Oak Lane. Well, I'm glad you're here today, and I'm going to continue. Last week, we had to stop right maybe 2-3 paragraphs short of finishing this chapter on what your wife wants you to know. We're talking, of course, to husbands, and I'm going to finish up this chapter and then get to a chapter for the men, in favor of the men. Remember, we were talking about John and Helen and the fact that Helen just was not happy. She just was not content in their marriage relationship. She wanted to be recognized as more than just a housewife, more than just a mother, someone who did domestic chores well and all of that. What John could not see was that she needed to be appreciated for her personhood, aside from the things she did. To base everything on her serving skills alone was shallow in her eyes. Yes, she really was a good mom and a good wife who kept a good home, but that was what she did, not who she was. What John could do to begin reversing some of her malaise is to begin simply looking at the things she was complaining about. Use these things as road markers towards a different future. Rather than try to defend the things that irritated her, he could begin to highlight the things where she sought recognition. She wanted to be recognized as the beautiful woman in his life. She was discouraged about the few pounds that she had gained after giving birth to their 3 children, and she was still a beautiful lady. Their comfortable home had become for her a private prison. John needed to celebrate her apart from their home. He had to begin taking her out to places where she could be noticed. In order to do this, he had to recognize that a wardrobe change was necessary. The clothes that she wore to her PTA functions and even church services probably would not fit the bill. Once he really got it, he began to reinforce his appreciation for her as a person. Instead of buying her toasters, he started buying her dresses and lots of personal things. Helen needed his time. She began to enjoy sharing his thoughts about life and the ways of the world. He discovered that she loved to write poetry and had actually been doing it and tucking it away in all kinds of storage places. John began helping her to gather these gems of creative genius and fashioning them into a book form. He found her a publisher. They launched an unexpected career, and Helen was so pleased. Helen also began to show concern for their food diet. Rather than complain because they were beginning to eat differently, he offered no resistance. He even started going to the gym with her. John found that Helen seemed to appreciate him more as he began to soften his understanding of her. At one point, she wondered who this new man in her life was. And that concludes that chapter. Now I'd like to get into the chapter called Husbands and Their Secrets. It is often said that women are difficult to understand. This is mostly said because women tend to change before their first pattern becomes what we thought was going to be a pattern. Confusing? Well, yes, you've got the point. Just when you think that you've figured it out with a woman, there's likely to be another wrinkle in the fabric. The good news for women is that this little confusing trait actually seems to draw men in like a moth to a flame. The mysterious ways of a woman both frustrates and delights us. I talked to a young husband whose wife was expecting. He was both frustrated and intrigued with his wife's crying. When I asked her what is wrong, she can't tell me, he said. Sometimes she's crying because she is sad and sometimes because she is happy, but there's never a reason for either of these times. I just smiled and reassured him that everything would work out fine. I thought of Pastor Paul Earl Shepherd's recommendation that we all become panologists. in our philosophical dealings, panology seems to work. According to Pastor Paul, that means simply that everything will pan out all right after a while in the end. I told the young man to be patient and kind and as helpful as he could. Perhaps some of what he was experiencing was due to the pregnancy, but it was not too far off from some of her regular behavior. I didn't want to tell him to stay tuned because after the baby arrives would come a whole different set of emotions from his wife. Now, after having said all of that, let's realize that, on the other hand, men have their own degree of difficulty. It is true that men tend to be a little more predictable in their behavior, but this does not at all explain our behavior. Honestly, we certainly can do some weird things too. For starters, let's look at some of the toys and games men play with. Dirt bikes, PlayStations, paintballs, Grand Theft Auto, the list goes on and on. But I think you get the idea. Many of these toys and games are centered on aggressive behavior. We tend to like things that blow up and self-destruct. Don't overlook the growing fad of home theater rooms and man caves. Men are buying huge TVs and media screens with surround sound to do nothing more than to get the action up closer and louder to us. If it is going to blow up, we want it. Want it up so close and personal that it makes us flinch and duck for cover. Violence is not only tolerated, it's expected. My wife and I have discovered recently that we cannot watch some types of movies together. I have no answer when she wants to know how come I'm doing this and how can I stand to watch all those car chases and bullets flying. There's something really weird going on when you see the mildest of men watching the most violent movies. Another strange question is what brings on a midlife crisis for some men. These men can go on through life without causing anyone to even raise an eyebrow, and suddenly change overnight. Sometimes it is a change in wardrobe that signals us that something is going on. Some men will remember in the 50s and 60s when some of the brothers began not buttoning most of the top buttons of their shirt, and I might add the bold and bright shirts with all these strange flowers and mixed up colors. Added to that was the large round peace sign around their necks. This jewelry was so large you almost wanted to pray that the brother wouldn't fall down off of the pavement into a running water stream in the streets. There was sure to be a drowning. Well, maybe it was not quite that large, but it was interesting. Ronald was doing pretty well in life. He had a wonderful wife and a loving daughter. He was moving up the corporate ladder and the money was real good. Suddenly, he wanted to be a ladies' man. He picked up some willing woman and went through some kind of sexual escapade. Tiring of this first affair, he started another, and then another. We lost count after that. He was finally discovered when his wife's friend Janice spotted him checking into a rather seedy motel where the friend did maid service. Thinking himself to be all of that, he lost everything. Certainly, all incidents of midlife crisis do not go into a affair. The behavior can take many paths, but sometimes it does go there. Some men suddenly get interested in dangerous adventures or sports that previously were not even anywhere on the radar. Why would a 50-year-old Ronnie out of the blue decide that he needed to become a race car driver? My thoughts and observations lead me to believe that a midlife crisis in a male signals some kind of personal unrest with oneself. It probably starts with a man doing an evaluation that concludes that he has not done very much with his life. Up to that present time, he figures he has been somewhat of a non-figure and maybe perhaps even a failure. It pushes on his mind that he needs to do something significant before it's too late. So then maybe he jumps into a plunge that seems to come from nowhere. He may feel that he is running out of time and needs to do it now. It is the inner voice that might just be based on no facts at all, or on some inner longing to be heard or seen or anything. It may be, and usually is, all in the mind of the person. Others around may be completely satisfied with who the man is or what he is doing. I think that it is very much related to that same lifetime drive that causes a man to need to be respected as a sign of love and approval. More male weirdness can be noted when we see that the male brain can cause men to be turned on sexually for no apparent reason. A piece of paper thrown across the room might end up producing a sexual thought, even though you know that you, dear lady, are not turned on that way. Don't forget that your husband is, and is likely to be coming from a whole other direction sexually. You both must find a way to fulfill each other's legitimate sexual need. You know, another area of strange behavior is that men tend to be very territorial. We read about men who fatally fight over a parking space. Recently in the Philadelphia area, two brothers-in-laws who happened to share the same house got into an almost fatal fight during the Democratic primaries because one was a Hillary Clinton supporter and the other a Barack Obama supporter. What were they thinking? Perhaps they were trying to lessen the vote by one. Yes, men do have some difficult issues to define manhood. Maybe when men accuse women of being difficult to understand, it is because our own big bag of difficulties is there. Okay, I'm going to stop. You know, that's why we call it Radio's Fastest 15, just because of that. We run out of time all the time. Listen, why don't you check out my book site, davidstevensbooks.com. That's davidstevensbooks.com, all lowercase letters. If you want to also listen to this program again, why not check out soundcloud.com/sound-marriages. That's soundcloud.com/sound-marriages. Until next time, so long. Call us at 215-548